Alrighty, welcome everyone to another History Happy Hour in our 2025 series. Today I'd like to welcome to the stage, or to the podium, Mr. Graham Perry. He's a noted historic preservationist specifically focused in historic cemeteries and the preservation therein. So thank you for joining the Heritage Alliance and the Chesterton State Historic Site, as well as the Tennessee Historical Commission for another wonderful History Happy Hour. Thank you.
That's a perfect introduction. Usually, like, people get up here and they read my entire bio. I'm like, don't do that. So I'm Graham Perry, and I work at the Tennessee Historical Commission. I am, Patrick always tells me to say that I'm the Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist at the Tennessee Historical Commission, but I also, by default, am the one for the state. So he used to catch me saying that all the time and say, oh, let's just say the commission. Like, okay. So, but yes, I am the only one in the state. My stomping grounds as far as cemeteries are everywhere from the teeny tiny tip of where Memphis ends to all the way up in Johnson County. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So, and I've been everywhere. So, not everywhere, but I've been everywhere from tip to tip. I've had some things in Johnson County I've had to do too. But one of the things that happened to me when I first started this job back about 5.5 years ago, when I walked in, now keep in mind, I was trained as a historian. I was not trained as a cemetery preservation specialist, but I had worked at the State Museum for 11 years, and I had a lot of experience with artifacts and things like that. But one of the things that I think that they understood about me from my museum years is that I'm very, very dedicated and try to learn everything that I can about anything that I'm learning about. So that's kind of what happened here, because the first day that I walked into this job, I walked into a desecration in Rutherford County. I knew nothing about the law. I had to learn it real quick. I only had two of the laws that we're going to talk about today that are they're pretty much the major point of what I have to deal with, but there's a lot of other stuff, and I've spent a lot of time going through the Tennessee Code Annotated trying to find anything that relates whatsoever with the cemeteries whatsoever, because I get some of the most bizarre questions sometimes, and I feel like that maybe there's something in TCA that will tell me. So I've made sure that I've done that. It didn't take me long because I started reading everything that I could right then, because I didn't want to have another cemetery desecration and not know what to do. Anyway, so we're going to talk about cemetery law today, all these things that I've got in my head now, and of course I always use a PowerPoint because there's pretty pictures for you, and for me it keeps me on track so that I know what I'm talking about and it reminds me. So that's the beauty about a PowerPoint for me. So I guess we can go to the next slide. So Tennessee cemetery law overview. Well, there's some strong points and weak points. As far as the strong points, we have the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act, which is TCA 46A. That was passed in 1996, I believe, if my memory serves me. And that was obviously, I think Steve McDaniel may have spearheaded it, but it was obviously things were happening with development. I mean, as you can imagine, Nashville's growing and everywhere else is growing too, and they were having issues between developers and cemeteries, so I have a feeling that that's what the thinking behind that was. The bad point about it is many don't read it before they take action. And that's where I come in, because one of the things that I dedicate my job to is to try to jump on top of things. It's like if somebody calls me and they say, hey, there's a development happening over here, I find out who the developer is, and I'll send them a nice happy letter that goes, oh, and we just know that there's a cemetery there, and it's the so-and-so cemetery on parcel so-and-so, so-and-so. And let them know that, and a lot of times I'll get calls from developers that want me to help with it. And you know what? That's a good thing, because if the developer is calling me and asking for help, that's better than the alternative. So, relocation process is clear. It's in TCA 46-4. It was passed after World War II, probably because of development, post-war boom and everything, and development after that, because people were running into cemeteries and they were like, well, we've got to have a way to deal with them. Like, okay, well, we'll have a relocation process. We're going to talk about that a little. The problem with it is, of course, relocation is expensive, so is non-compliance worth the risk? Some people think so. And again, that's why I'm here. Tax incentives exist for cemeteries. They're kind of confusing, though. Even I'm confused by them. The benefits are, relatively tiny, and they're often reported incorrectly. Like, for example, if somebody reports wants an assessor's office to set off a cemetery as a separate plat, they don't put who the owner was. So the owner's not really getting a benefit from it, which I want to encourage owners to do that, not discourage them from that. The desecration law is clear. Now, here's the problem. It's in TCA 46-1-313. Well, guess what? The problem is TCA 46-1 only counts for commercial cemeteries. The other ones are exempt. So even though it's in the law and you can presume that maybe it covers it, it doesn't officially cover it. There is another place where desecration is listed as a crime, but it doesn't tell you what desecration is. In 46-1 it does. So another thing is with desecration, and I have issues with this from time to time, is the issue of enforcement. We are going to talk about where desecration is. It's in Title 39, which is the code that sheriff's offices and people like that are supposed to be abiding by, because that's criminal law, and desecration is in that. And sometimes I run into offices where they're like, I don't have anything to do with that, that's a civilian thing. I'm like, and I always say, well, so if I see somebody murdering somebody in my yard or in their yard, does that mean that y'all can't go do it because it's a civilian problem? Yeah, I don't think that's the way it works. So, and most of the time what happens is they start to realize that, that Title 39 does count. And I know it's irritating because people don't deal with cemetery stuff very much, but it's not like it's something they deal with every day on their job. So I have pity, I really do. Criminal penalties are in TCA 39, Chapter 17, but the problem is, of course, they're defined in TCA 39 and not in 46. It's like if you look at 46, all you'll see is some things are Class E felonies, and you don't see anything else with that. So I think that's kind of confusing for a lay person. It was for me at first. Then we have Hines versus Tennessee, which was a precedent set in 1911, and it strengthens the law. It actually puts it more in, the honest truth is a lot of states refer to Hines versus Tennessee when they're dealing with cemetery issues. So we can be very happy that Tennessee paved the way. The biggest problem is that I have found out is that visitation, which is talked about in Hines versus Tennessee, is not in Title 46. And so some people say, well, that was 1911. That doesn't count anymore. Well, guess what? It does. And so I have to remind people that Hines counts. Just because it was done in 1911 doesn't mean that it doesn't count. Next. Ding. Next.
No.
That's okay.
Not my phone, Claudia.
It's your fault. So TCA 46 is the entire chapter of 46 has to do with cemeteries in some form or fashion. The ones that my office deals with mostly are 46-4 and 46-8. Those are the ones that I primarily get calls about. TCA 46-4 is termination of use of land as a cemetery. In 101, it basically states to landowners that you have to prove that a cemetery is abandoned, neglected, or threatened. And we'll talk about what those mean in a minute. 102 defines interested persons. There are several different people that can be interested persons, but by and large it refers to family members. Those are the main interested persons. But some government officials can be, it just depends on who's granted the authority to do things. 103, it describes the process for determination, and it is a detailed process, which may irritate people. They don't want to go through it, but they have to. And actually, the Tennessee Historical Commission is part of that process. We have to post relocation petitions on our site, and they have to stay up there for 30 days before it can be touched. No touching of cemeteries before that posting goes up. 104, provisions for reinterment. In a nutshell, it just says that you have to be respectful for the deceased when you're moving their bodies. So TCA 46.8 is the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. The 103 part of it actually says that a landowner has a duty to protect a cemetery. Now, it does not define what that duty is. So I imagine if you get a good enough lawyer, you can convince somebody, well, it's really this duty. I don't know. 103A, it says it must be on a deed of transfer if a known cemetery is on a piece of property. If it's not on a deed already, it has to be. And I run into that a lot of times. A lot of times people will not want to report there's a cemetery on the property for some reason, and sometimes it ends up in land fraud, and I've actually had people go back and get money back when they haven't reported the cemetery. And I work with those landowners too. It also defines a protection boundary. It does not say that a cemetery has to have a 10-foot buffer. It says each grave has to, or a crypt has to have a 5-foot buffer. What most developers do these days is they will just they'll leave a larger than 10-foot buffer around the whole cemetery because they don't want to start turning up bones, because then they have to stop work. So 103C says if you don't like this, see 46.4. And then you can go through the process of trying to relocate your graves. But other than that, no touching. Bad to touch. Go next. Just to talk about 46.1 a little bit, like I said, it deals mainly with commercial cemeteries. There's some others that can be in there too, but usually I've seen it apply to that. It defines a cemetery. Now this is funny. It defines it in 46.1, but remember all the other cemeteries are immune from 46.1. They don't have to worry about it. Well, it defines the cemetery there. So there's not a cemetery definition elsewhere in the law to tell you what these other cemeteries are. Fortunately, I think they have just passed 46.3, and they have established a definition of cemeteries which I think applies to everybody, and it's the same definition. Any land or structure in this state dedicated to and used or intended to be used, that's very important, for interment of the human remains. One grave in Tennessee equals a cemetery. I know in Arkansas you have to have more than 4, and I don't know what you call 4 or less. The cemetery can even have no graves. Intent of use is all that is needed. Case in point, if a family member back in 1858, the landowner said, oh, and I dedicate an acre of land for a family cemetery. Well, guess what? That cemetery is an acre big. Just because 5 people are buried in it does not make it less than an acre big. And I have had instances where the 1858 document was the only document that actually proved what was going on, and they had to abide by it. Cemetery purposes, any and all things requisite or necessary for or incident or convenient to the establishment, maintenance, management, operation, improvement, and conduct of a cemetery, the preparation for the premises for the interment and the interment of the human dead, that's a big one, human dead. And the care, preservation, and embellishment of cemetery property. You can tell that one kind of applies to commercial cemeteries because those are supposed to have perpetual care funds and things like that. Family cemeteries don't have to, obviously. It's good if they do, but they rarely do. Okay, so next. 46.4, termination of use. There's the nice picture of the first one that I walked into when I had a job where the bulldozers just bulldozed everything over. And the interesting thing is the cemetery wasn't even on the property they were bulldozing. It was actually in the TDOT right of way. But they just pushed it over, man, which is why I put this little guy right there jumping a bulldozer over, you know. This is what I'm trying to stop. And hopefully we're all trying to stop that. 46.4.101 defines the purpose of this act. Basically it says it's a cemetery abandoned or neglected, or is the purpose of the property surrounding a cemetery inconsistent with the proper reverence for the deceased. So those are the three things that you have to try to prove. 46.4.102 defines interested parties can be family members, relatives, and anyone having a right of easement. And people that would be having right of easement were like, oh, you're a prison crew that goes out to clean it. That's, you know, established by the county, things like that. It applies to all cemeteries in Tennessee, not just commercial or anything. 46.4.103 actions and proceedings. Well, this is what I always do, and this happens when you're cleaning cemeteries too. First, check to see if you really own the cemetery, because you might not. Now, that may not prevent you from being able to relocate it if it's on its own separate plat, because people do that from time to time. But you can't just do anything to a cemetery even if you own it. I mean, you still have to be respectful of the deceased. Step 2, the complainant must first publish a notice of intent to relocate the cemetery using press sources that are common to the county. And this has become complicated because since we've gone to the internet, sometimes those, it's not like the old days when you had the Tennessean and that was the only thing everybody read in Nashville, you know what I mean? It's like now there's various things you can do. I always tell people when they're asking about cemetery relocation, I'm like, well, look, just cover your rear. Do as much as you can. Don't just like print off a flyer and put it in a record shop and think that that'll hold up, because it probably won't when people start challenging it. And they do challenge it. The complainant, let's see, I already said that. County Chancery Court must then be contacted and to petition for termination of the cemetery. So it's the Chancery Court. And I have seen people do this without attorneys, not many. Usually people have an attorney do this, but there was a couple of instances in Memphis where they didn't have an attorney and they did it successfully. The remaining interested parties are considered defendants. Now, this is very interesting because what I have run into in the past is sometimes attorneys, if they haven't dealt with this a whole lot, they don't realize that there's this special attorney law that says you have to do due diligence to find family members and things like that. You can't just have a Jane Doe case without having looked. And I have actually in the past caught at least one attorney saying, oh yeah, well, we looked and we couldn't find any family people. But the funny thing is I've been contacted by a family person a year before about the cemetery for a completely different problem. So I had one, and so when I got the petition, I was like, let's look and see. And I found 5 in an hour. So I immediately wrote the attorney back and said, oh, are you sure you want me to post this petition? Because I found 5 family members. And they were not happy, but they did it. Because they have to send out notices to them. I mean, it's convenient if you say you're family members, but it's also not right, not legal. Step 4, the petition must be filed with the Tennessee Historical Commission and posted on our site for 30 days before you can do And it's actually, before you can do anything for the cemetery, the Chancery Court has to issue a final ruling that says yea or nay. It could say nay. I've seen them say nay before. 46-4-104, judgments and decrees, termination and removal. Well, the circuit court determines the outcome based on the evidence tied to 46-101. Is it abandoned, neglected, or are the surroundings not adequate for the proper respect for the deceased? All right, next. TCA 46A, this is my favorite. Family Burial Grounds Protection. So 46.8-101 states the purpose. It's intended to provide notice to buyers of property with known burial grounds and grave sites. Obviously, you can't know there's an unknown burial ground on your land. I mean, something you have to discover. And there are ways to discover it. Sometimes people are supposed to tell you when they know. Sometimes you actually just stumble in and walk in, oh, I'm hunting in my backyard. Oh, here's a grave. TCA 46.8-102, definitions. It defines what a crypt is, what a grave site, and it applies to human remains, not to pets. Now, I do keep a map, and I don't know if any of you have seen the map on the Tennessee Historical Commission website yet. It's got, I think it's got, in our database we have 34,000 cemeteries. There are about 27,000 that are identified and that are on the map. So we have a pretty good idea of where a lot of cemeteries are. In fact, more so than any other state that I've seen. And that was a process to put together too. I had to go to a lot of different places to find that information. But nevertheless, I do keep pet cemeteries on there. And it's funny because TDEC thanked me for that for some reason. I don't know why. But they said, yeah, we're glad you put those on there. But I never really got an answer as to why they're glad that I put them on there. But I have gotten calls about pet cemeteries. I got a call about one. So there was a pet cemetery, and there was like somebody there that had like 21 burials, and one of them was their horse or something like that. It was just really expansive. Well, the person that owned the cemetery sold it to somebody that wanted to just put buildings on it. Well, there's no cemetery law for pet cemeteries in Tennessee, so the guy could actually build on it. But one of the problems that was going on is he was keeping anybody from visiting their pets in their cemetery. And so that was a problem, and I really, really had struggled with trying to figure out how to help, because I realized that Tennessee law didn't really cover that. But I did find out that there were 2 people buried in the pet cemetery. So I was like, well, guess what? It's a cemetery. So I have no idea what has transpired, but I kind of helped the people that had the pets on there navigate through that. I'm not sure how it turned out. But I know that those 2 graves that are on there, at least those are the cemetery. And they cannot be built upon. And I told them, I said, and if they do start to build on those 2 graves, let me know. Okay, so 103 says that a landowner has a duty to protect graves or crypts, and that disturbances are prohibited, and if you don't like that, you can have a petition to transfer the remains. A cemetery owner has the duty to protect known graves. What does that mean? I don't know. They don't define it. Which is kind of sad. I mean, I get calls all the time. People think that landowners' duties are to keep a road open to it. Well, no, it's not. Although, when a landowner won't do that, I always tell the cemetery, the family, I'm like, well, you can do it. But then it comes to, well, that costs money. I'm like, yeah, I know. So I run into that sometimes. I run into people think that the landlord should keep the cemetery maintained, and there's nothing that says that. It's up to the family to maintain cemetery or to appoint an agent to do so on these family burial grounds.
Does the landowner, if he owns everything around the
Has to
cemetery,
let you.
he has to have allowed an easement?
Has to allow. Yeah, there is always an implied easement, and Hines versus Tennessee says, from the nearest road in a reasonable fashion at reasonable times. And I've dealt with some of those too, where landowners have blocked, and guess what? Every one of them I've had successfully. I mean, it's just that they can't deal with it. And I've had landowners call me about it and go, well, what do I do? And I'll help a landowner say, well, here's the deal. You know, you can put a gate up there. You just have to make sure that family members, if they request it, have a key. You know, and as far as livestock, you can't use that as an excuse, because there's a livestock law that says if anybody crosses a parcel of property that has livestock on it, the landowner is not responsible for any damage that the livestock might cause upon you. So, just some things to think about. The owner must ensure the cemetery is on the deed, which we said, prior to sale or transfer. And I say or transfer because sometimes you're transferring it to your children. It defines a prohibited area 10 feet around a grave and 5 feet around a crypt. And you cannot you can't go bust up headstones because you want to or anything like that. That's it. That's within the 10 feet. It gets really complicated when you talk about family members who want to, and I've had this happen sometimes, they want to replace a gravestone that is like old with a brand new one. I'm like, well, and so I'm always advising them, you know, leave the old one there. You can make a new one, but leave that one there for posterity. But I can't stop them from removing it because they're a family member and they're maintaining their grave however they want to. Now, you could have 1,000 family members and they could argue about it, but I don't have anything to do with that. My job is not helping family members argue. Also, it notifies the owner that there is an option and that to do something about it, and that's 46.4, which we've talked about already. It was really interesting because this cemetery over here was in Williamson County, and the family that had it, and it was their family cemetery. They were like, well, you know, it's just really small. And I looked at it and I was like, there's probably 100 graves out here. This is not a small family cemetery. And it's like when I looked through the names in the cemetery, it looked apparent to me that they had actually allowed other community members to be buried up there. Well, those people have the right to go see their ancestors too. And I have seen this cause problems, like when one cemetery, they've given permission for a person that somebody else doesn't like to bury in the cemetery. Well, gosh, once they're buried, they can come visit. It doesn't matter how much you dislike them. But I don't get involved in that. All right, next. So, TCA 39.17.3, criminal offenses. Well, it is in TCA 39.17.3.11. It is about desecration of honored places or flags. Guess what one of the honored places is? A place of worship or burial. You can't do that. You can't desecrate that. It is a Class E felony. I always remind people, I say, if you want to create a felony and not vote, that's up to me. Maybe you'll won't be voting for somebody that I'll vote for anyway. So, I don't know. But anyway, it is Class E felony, and I always point out to law enforcement, per count, if they tear up 5 headstones, that's 5 counts of desecration, and that's the way they should prosecute it. TCA 39.17.12 is about corpse abuse. It is also a Class E felony. The prison time for that is even longer, it's 1 to 6 years. I think it's like up to 4 years for the first one. And a fine of up to $3,000. And this is where I always talk to developers about, yeah, don't turn up a corpse and then just start plowing over, because if I find out, I'm going to call the police, or anybody can, and they are going to charge you for that. And Department of Archaeology knows all about that. They deal with that on a regular basis. So, okay. Oh, and I also will tell people, you see this? That's that looks like an old skeleton, right? Well, it's only a few years old from the body farm. And I always point out to people, you don't know who's buried in that grave you just turned up. Please do not be an accessory to a crime. All right, next. So, what do I do if you see desecration, it doesn't matter if you're a family member or not. You can report it to the local police, even I've reported them. You contact the county court to notify them of the desecration, and these entities must uphold Tennessee law, it says so. If they refuse, call the regional DA and notify me. Because my job, one of my biggest parts of my job is to be really annoying. And I'm very good at being really annoying. I'm happy when I do it. You know, I mean, I don't want to, I just want to make them understand that what they're doing is not proper. If the DA doesn't do anything, call me and I'll notify the Attorney General's office. Corpse abuse. Well, accidental disinterment or intentional. If it's accidental, stop work immediately. Call the police and the health department immediately, and also contact the Department of Archaeology. And like I say, remember, you may have found a murder victim, so don't be an accessory. And I did say the Tennessee Department of Archaeology should be called as well. You can call me and I'll call them because I'm in contact with them all the time. Phil Hodge is their ruler. Phil Hodge, the ruler of archaeology. If you see intentional disinterment, call local police immediately and get them out there as fast as you can. And if they go, no, call me because I'll get them out there as fast as I can. Trust me, I will get right on it. Next. So, here's a weird one. This has to do with cemeteries. TCA 68550A is about disinterment and reinterment. Well, guess what? This isn't in Title 46 that has to do with cemeteries. This is in the Health Department's code. 68550A says authorization for disinterment and reinterment in cases of movement of cemeteries or parts of cemeteries or for reuniting families shall be required prior to disinterment of dead body or fetus. B says such authorization shall be issued by the state registrar to a licensed funeral director or person acting as such, meaning an archaeology company, upon proper application. So in this little area that I had up in Johnson County where the health department never issued the license for removal and they removed it anyway, that guy might be in jail. I'm not sure, I haven't checked. But yeah, you have to do that. Now the funny thing is sometimes you can call the health department. I called them once and they didn't realize they were supposed to do that. But that's beside the point. I don't know who I called over there that didn't know, but I knew, so I explained that to them. Who is allowed to reinter remains? Funeral homes can be used, they can actually be used for any grave site, but what we recommend is archaeology companies for graves the 1920s and before. Because a lot of times what you're doing is a symbolic relocation. A lot of times there's nothing there, or nothing recognizable there. You're just moving dirt. But you're moving dirt of the person that was there. Sometimes you get bones and things like that, and I've seen that as well. But that's what we're going to talk about archaeology. The archaeologists know what they're looking for. And you can use archaeologists for any grave. Next. So let's look at Walter Hines versus State. It sets precedent for Tennessee and across the nation. It is not completely included in Tennessee code yet. There are some aspects of it that are. The main one that's not included is the discussion on visitation. Keep in mind, other states, based on this, have actually put visitation rules in their laws, and Tennessee has not. So go tell your representatives and stuff like that they need to do that. Because when I write this next 5-year document that's coming up in December, I need to try to get people in the legislature to understand that these are some things that can change in the law that will help streamline it. That's what I work with the cemetery committee. That's what we work on. So, it defines interested party rights. Interested parties have the right to maintain, repair, and beautify a cemetery. Now, what is beautification? Well, what I think is beautiful and what you think is beautiful might not be the same. And if we're like family members for the same person, we might argue. And I've seen that happen. And when people have asked me to do something about it, I'm like, that's between y'all. I ain't getting involved in that. They have the right of visitation, and they even have the right of burial. I wish it said, have they right of burial if the cemetery isn't full, but no, they didn't say that. And so what happens a lot of times is if a landowner doesn't get boundaries established around a cemetery, people will start continuing the burials out, and then I get calls about it where somebody hasn't let somebody bury. I'm like, man, there's no boundaries on the cemetery. You have to let them bury there. They've got family people. They don't like that. But then I advised them. I said, if you want that to stop, then get it set aside as a separate parcel. Anyway, it also declares that a cemetery is a cemetery forever, unless, of course, 46.4 happens. But in a sense, what that means is you can plow all the headstones you want to off a farm. That cemetery is still there, and it's still as big as it ever was. And if we find out, then what I'll do, if it's a 1/4 acre or larger, I will call the assessor's office, because by law, they are supposed to go and set that aside as a tax-exempt plat. And that is in state law, which might not make you happy if I find out that you've been plowing up headstones. A landowner cannot obstruct interested party visitation, and they also cannot desecrate. This also means plowing up headstones and using the land for something else. Walter Hines states that, specifically, that graves are not to be used for any kind of commercial activity. It's like once the grave is there, that ceases. And so I always point out to people, well, yeah, if they're running cows through that cemetery and it's a tax-exempt plat, well, they're breaking tax law. Because they are they're fattening their cows on a place that they don't have the right to feed. Okay, next. Other relevant precedents. Well, just to show you how Tennessee has just been across the nation and everybody just loves us. Davis versus May in Texas, 2003, it confirmed the right of ingress and egress for not only family members, but for county people. McCoy versus Barr, Kansas, 2012. County employees are granted, well, that's the one that lets the county go. But the right of ingress and egress in the first one is for visitors, and this next one was for county members. County members have the right to maintain the cemetery if they want to as well. Most county people won't do that because it costs money. And there's one county that in Tennessee that has a full cemetery rehabilitation program, and that's Wayne County. And so far they haven't told me that it's not working, so hopefully it's working. And it took them years to get it going. They had to get all the people on the commission, or the county commission, to be on board about it, to set aside funds to do it. But so far they've done it right. Rhodes versus Nicholas, Missouri, 1981. Relatives are granted the right, I love this one, granted the right to restrain an owner from interfering with a cemetery's purpose. So if an owner comes out to stop you from burial, you can restrain him or her. Stoker versus Brown. Now this is a Tennessee case, 1979, probably the most recent one. In a nutshell, what it states, and trust me, it's a really long case, and I've read all of it, but what it seems to say to me is that a cemetery is the same size as it ever was, even though you thought that somehow it miraculously shrank. Like, for instance, if I start plowing around a cemetery, maybe I'll take a little more this time. Maybe this year I'll go in like 10 more feet. Well, it doesn't matter. The cemetery is the same size no matter how much you take of it. If it's declared in 1858 that it's an acre cemetery, it's an acre cemetery. So next. Why can't I plow up a cemetery? It's my land. Sounds like a quote from my father-in-law, bless his heart, he's deceased. But, first of all, it might not really be yours. I would call the registered deeds of deeds and confirm. A lot of times in these deeds, it will say with the exclusion of a cemetery, which means it ain't yours. Even if it is yours, you still must leave it alone, C-46A. There is a legal process to follow for relocation if you'd like to try that. And if the rules make you angry, blame the English common law, because that's where we got our common law from about cemeteries, even though ours has been altered a little bit. And oh, by the way, English common law came from Roman law. So these are the common laws that have been going on for at least 2,000 years. We just happen to have codified it in 1911. Blame the First Amendment of the USS Constitution. That was a shit. Blame the First Amendment, establishing freedom of religion, and also that you can't oppress people for their religious beliefs, because a cemetery is a religious entity. It is a 70 tax-exempt religious entity. If somebody is going there and you yell and holler at them and disrupt them, well, guess what? That's a disruption that can be prosecuted. So if you don't like religious liberty, then you can just yell all you want to until you go to jail. Blame yourself for purchasing the land before you knew the law. And I have people call me sometimes and say, there's a cemetery on the land, what do I need to know about it? And I will tell them. Because they need to know that, a lot of times people get afraid of, people are going to come to a cemetery all the time. I was like, well, with most, probably not. I said, but yeah, with some they could. You might have family members, and I said, and the best thing to do is work with them. Next. So what should I do if I'm a landowner? Follow the law. If you don't, you're going to lose. It's expensive, and it will take up your limited time on earth. Some people like term law. I give this example. This happened with my wife's family. Her father, unfortunately, had Alzheimer's, and he's deceased now. But another person in the family got him stirred up about a road that the county had just, they had verbally told him, oh yeah, Bob, that's yours now. Well, the thing was, that wasn't in a document. And so he just always thought it was his road and everything. Well, the person that convinced him that the next farmer shouldn't have use of that road because it's your road, let me just explain to you. $25,000 later, with like a new survey, there were other things that they had to pay for. They had to tear down the gates that they built, and actually somebody tore it down for them, but that's beside the point. But what ended up happening was, when they did the survey, they found out that most of the road was on the other guy's property. So, my advice is don't go that route if you're a landowner. Let's just, call me, I'll help, whatever. There are things that you have to do and things you don't have to do. And I'll help you through that. Be nice. Visitors may be annoying, and I've known some annoying visitors. But try to work something out if they request access. Don't just do what you want and hope no one finds out, because if you do, interested parties will call me, and I'll investigate, and my investigation will really annoy you. Because I don't stop until it's done. Visitor. Be courteous. There are many reasons a landowner is reluctant to have you on his or her property. I had a large spread at one time before I paid off my house with it. If I found a cemetery on my land, I'm going to follow the darn cemetery laws. Okay, that's just the way it is. If I found a cemetery on there, I just would have been. That's how I would have done. As a landowner, I wouldn't have want people to go and shoot heroin up in my cemetery. So because they have a duty to protect the cemetery, they do have the duty to call the police if they don't know who you are. So this is what I always tell family members, that this is why you've got to, by law, you don't have to go call the landowner, but you should. Especially nowadays with, there's just guns under every chair. There's probably some taped under your chair right now. You just never know, and people are using them as well. So don't go get shot on somebody's land. If they are like blocking you from access, call me, and trust me, we'll get to that. And we'll fix it. Trust me, the cemetery's still going to be there by the time we fix it. At least I hope so. I hope that they don't get up and walk away. If a landowner is a curmudgeon, be nice anyway and document everything. Document phone calls, document everything. Just make sure that you've got a nice, it can be e-documentation, it can be paper documentation, whatever. Just make sure that you keep that, because that'll come in handy when we start dealing with it. But don't be mean to them, because that ain't going to help. Okay, just say, oh, okay, and walk away or whatever, and then call me. Follow the law. If you don't, you're only going to incur unwanted expenses and penalties. So don't go up there and have a huge party at midnight. Most states, as far as reasonable access, the ones that I've seen, every one that I've seen says reasonable access is daylight hours. So I've had people call me up and say, well, the only time I can get there is 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, well, that's probably not cool. You're probably going to have to work out something with the landowner, but I don't want you up there at 9 o'clock, I mean, I'm sorry that your job is like that. My job keeps me from doing anything I want to do. But that's it. All right, next. So for more information, you can call me or email me. I do best by email, and I like to do email because I have a paper record, quote unquote. I like to be, like when I give you emails of people to contact about certain situations, I'll always say, yeah, and copy me on it too, so that they know you're talking to me. You can also call the Division of Archaeology. Phil Hodge is really nice, and there's his information as well. And they've done some great things. Matter of fact, they keep doing some things that are great and they don't tell me about sometimes. But no, they did there was a cemetery I was working on in Memphis, and it was quite an issue. It had to do with somebody that thought that the property owner should have been taking care of the cemetery, and there's no law. There's no law that said they have to. But it went on and on and on, and finally the archaeologist went down there. I found out later on. I did get an email from them later on, but I didn't even know they were going down there. And they probed, and they found like 75 graves. And they also found graves, a large number of graves in an area that I suspected there were that was on somebody else's property. So guess what? The cemetery is over 2 parcels, and it's the cemetery. The cemetery is the same size as it ever was. So does anyone have any questions or answers? I'll take answers. Yes.
All right. There was a situation I heard about, and they said if there is a grave, family grave, whatever, on a property, then if there is any kind of a civil or legal action, the government cannot take the property because there's.
You mean?
Say there's a action against the individual family.
Oh, they say that because they don't want to do it.
So they couldn't confiscate,
Well, now as far as confiscating the property, I mean, counties, and trust me, I've looked at this law as well. They have the ability to take any cemetery they want to at any time.
They just can't disturb the grave.
Nope, they can't disturb the grave.
But they can't take the property.
Yeah, they can. Now, are they going to? Probably not.
Be under eminent domain.
Yeah, it would be under eminent domain, and then people are going to holler because they're not taking care of it, and then they're gonna call.
Or legal action, but I think in terms of legal action where they're taking the property away from an individual. for-
They might be able to do that, I'm not sure.
That would vary from state to state.
It probably, yeah, absolutely would vary from state to state. Yes, sir?
It's kind of the opposite. You have a farm out here with 40, 50 acres, you want to create a family lot.
You can do that, and I know how. The way the law reads right now is if you're in a township, like in the boundaries of a township, they have the right to make, requirements for cemeteries and things like that, and it may be for health reasons, I'm not sure. But if you're out in the county, generally speaking, as long as you've got a death certificate, you can put somebody in the ground. I always suggest when people talk to me about it, I'm like, and please tell me where it is so that the developers won't come and get it later on. I'll stick it on my files and we'll know it's there.
Do they have to be involved?
No. They do not, yes.
You have a map of the different cemeteries in the state. Can we access it?
Oh, absolutely. It's on the Tennessee Historical Commission website. If you go to the state programs, and then you'll see the cemetery program, and you'll see that there's some toggles. I wish they had pretty pictures on them, but we have a cheap website. But anyway, it says cemetery map, and historic cemetery register is all in that same link. And you can go look at the cemetery map. Now, the public map, I will tell you this. Once you zero in to a certain amount, or to a certain level, then you won't see it anymore because I don't want people like zeroing into people's backyards. But I can. So if you have a question about a cemetery that you need to zero in on, you can call me and I can help you with that. Because I have the exact
I'm
location.
going to add a little something there. If it's in Washington County, contact Heritage Alliance.
Oh, yeah.
We will do it locally here. They do it all the time.
And if he does it, then I don't have to. And that's awesome. There's only 95 counties here. I need all the help I can get.
Does your office cover Native American burial grounds too?
Okay, so we do not do prehistoric. I leave that to the Department of Archaeology. However, historic burials do fall into my realm, but I do defer to the Department of Archaeology because of the NAGPRA laws and stuff, and I don't want to get tangled up in that. Because they've had to deal with it and I have not.
What about the new burial things that they have where they're the capsules that you plant a tree on top, so you're planting a grove of your relatives?
Are you talking about like on the ashes or?
No, it's a big capsule that you put a body in and you plant a tree on top of it, so you're basically burying.
Green burials.
Hmm?
The green burials.
Yeah, I mean,
That would fall under the same.
well, it does fall. I mean, it falls under this. I mean, but you can have a green burial. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no law against it.
Okay, but you don't have, the tree is basically the tombstone. So how is that going to be protected?
That's a good question.
Yeah. When they start getting into that sort of, because that's the new, these
Because my,
capsules are relatively new.
Because my son works, is a manager at the Cumberland River Compact, and his friend owns Larkspur, that's in Sumner County, and that's where my wife wants to stick me. So, and I say that's fine. I'll enjoy it out there. All natural burial, little birds and stuff. What was your question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, and neither of them are really law related,
Okay.
but cemetery
It
related.
doesn't matter.
After Helene, we had a lot of damage here, and so I was wondering if you could list any resources for people that might want to learn about cleaning markers
Yes.
that have been, coated in debris or mud, repairing markers, and if they're capable or not capable, resources for that. And then if somebody has had a marker show up on their land that wasn't originally on their land, who can they get in touch with? And is that
I'm going to get that's with me if they want to. I've dealt with markers like that before as well. You can always call Gordon over here. But I also have it's a shorter list than I would like, but I do have a list of people, a lot of them are in the CCUS, and of course it's disbanded, but I still have all the people on my list. And I also I try to arrange workshops. It has to be at places that are a 501 or government run or something like that. But to get Jonathan Appel down there and to get Mike Alexander, I have to make sure, because we're actually paying for those workshops, I just have to make sure that they're not a private person getting money from them. But I do have a list of those people, and they have various levels of, they'll tell you what they can and they can't do. I've seen Mike Alexander's work as far as he repaired the box tombs at Bledsoe, and he did a great job. I was out there, I watched them some. But there's Terry Minton out there, he does stuff. Gosh, here there's Highland Monument Company does some stuff. Do you know those people?
There's different places, monument companies will do it, and I know Mike Alexander too.
Yeah.
We actually talked about having him come here,
Yeah.
the expense of it, and that kind
You
of
should.
stuff.
Is there anything online that people, so maybe they have a family cemetery or something like that, and not necessarily all the money up front, but they just want to do basic cleaning? Is there something people can watch online or some resources that can?
No, I mean, of course, I learned from Jonathan Appel, but I mean, he's got videos online. Jason Church has them online. Some of the CCUS people have online clean, and actually, I'm about to post one soon. But it's not rocket science to clean. You just want to make sure you don't want to cut corners. That's the main thing. Like with D2, the most proper way is get in there and use the D2 and then lather and do all that other stuff. But you can also spray D2 on a monument and walk away. It's just not going to be clean real quick. It'll take time. And don't use wet and forget because it hasn't been tested in the lab. Yep. I have to say that because I get people call me all the time about it. I'm like, yeah, don't use that.
Oh, and what is D2?
D2, oh shoot. Oh, I don't have a card here. It's literally called D2. If you look it up and then you'll see it, it's in kind of a white container with a brown label that says D2 on it. And what it is it's a biological agent. It does not hurt the stone. What it attacks is the biological growth that's in the stone. And a lot of times when we see the discoloration in the stone, that's what it is. And so, yes, go ahead.
I say, get in touch with Heritage Alliance or me. We have it we keep it, we do it, we teach it.
Yes. And he will. He's great. I know he is. Because he got me here. That's how I do it. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sir.
I know the cemetery that in Carter County, there was about 2 years ago desecrated and bulldozed, put a house. I have pictures where, I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures where the headstones.
Right.
It was a Civil War soldier, 13 Tennessee calf. Is there anything
I mean, it's
done
still,
about it now?
okay, so one of the things that I have discovered is it really helps to have pictures of the cemetery before it was desecrated so that people can see, oh, look, the cemetery disappeared and they realize there's a problem. I mean, it would still be under statute of limitations. I mean, it could be prosecuted. But I'd have to have the proof that the cemetery was there. That's the
I
thing.
think that could be done.
Yeah, if that is done, I can help you with that. Absolutely. They won't like me.
Thank you. I'd like to know if you've seen a change, maybe like a cultural shift or just, I can remember coming to graves with my family, my mother's side and that kind of thing. And maybe it's more popular now, maybe it's less popular now. Do you see different jurisdictions? Like, you know, the south compared to the northwest? Just any big picture like that, I think would be interesting to
Yeah,
know.
well, I would think that, I mean, from what I've seen, of course, then again, what I've seen in New England is in books, but I'm sure that they have some massive, you know, enterprises in helping cemeteries up there because the graves, the markers are so old and they're unique. It's hit and miss here. It's probably hit and miss in other states too, but, you know, one of the things that, because I get a call a lot of times from somebody and they'll be like 83 and they'll say, okay, well, who's going to take care of my cemetery? And I'm like, man, I wish you thought about that 30 years ago. Because one of the things that I try to do is I work with people to get young people interested in doing it. It's the only way you can do it. We're all going to go. I'm going to go, you know. So I'm always trying to like work out methods with them that they might be able to get young people interested so it will continue. But yeah, I've seen cemeteries where they were maintained for really great for a long time and then all of a sudden the person died and then like in 2 years they grew up. Because Mother Nature is not kidding here.
And cuts.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really important to get the young people out. One of the things that I do suggest for people is if you, I don't know why a lot of people haven't thought of this, and I haven't had somebody call me back and say that, oh wow, that was the greatest idea ever. So I'm waiting for my first one. But you know, my kids went to UT, and they had to have community service hours for their applications at UT. And so I took them kicking and screaming to different things that I thought that maybe that they would like. And sure enough, by the time they got there, they liked it. But to work with guidance counselors at high schools and things like that, to where you might be able to get some kids out there with somebody that's trained, that knows how to do it, that can train them how to do it. And as I was telling Gordon today, I was like, yeah, well, and always plant like somebody that knows a little bit of the history out there with them. Because when you bring those people to life, people realize that they were real people and not just a couple of stones in the ground that are maybe
Boy Scout troops.
Boy Scout
Legal
troops.
projects.
Yep.
We had one up in Virginia. Yeah, that was his project. He took an older cemetery that had been ignored for years. They
Yeah.
completely redid it with his trooper.
We had one in Cheatham County who, the cemetery was in good shape, but she actually mapped it. She took every piece of information off of every headstone. She GPSed every grave, and it created a cemetery map. And I was like, man, I wish everybody would do it. She won it. Well, I nominated her for one of our history awards, and she got it.
Is there any, this was in Canada, but the church graveyard, they needed more parking. So what they did is they paved over the graveyard.
Yes, that would be illegal.
Well, they moved all the stones to the other side of the church.
Mhm.
So they were lined up like they were before, you know, like 2 feet apart. And so the stones were all on one side and they paved them.
Yeah,
I
that's
couldn't,
written. They cannot do that.
There's still people in there.
I couldn't figure out because I'm going, you
And
can't
don't-
have anybody here, so we started asking questions because
Right.
there's no place. They said, well, they needed the parking lot, so they just moved the stones.
Yeah, and like I
Well,
said, I
they
don't
put
know
the
if I
parking
can.
lot where they moved the stones.
But I know here, no, bad.
Could you tell people where they can find the TCA if they wanted to dig more into this
Oh.
or like read the rest of the code?
Yeah, if you bring up Tennessee Code annotated, the one to look at is the LexisNexis one. That's the one that it's attached to the Tennessee government, that like the legislature side. There are others that you can find too, but they're outdated. It's like the one that's affiliated with the Capitol and stuff like that is updated regularly. And so you want to do that one because that's the most current. And I also found out, not too long ago, that there are also they're general, what are they? I can't remember. I found some cemetery stuff in like every year they do these, I forgot what what they're called. But general is in it, I know. And it's something that's not in the law, but the legislature every once in a while gets together and they do one for like 2021, 2022. And it's funny because you can go through those and find some stuff that relate to cemeteries in there, and I'm still looking at those. I've talked to our attorney about them too, and she was like, wow, I didn't even know these things were here. I was like, well, they're here, and they sound official. So, I mean, I guess if the legislature's talking about it and putting them out, they must be, right? Maybe? Well,
Does anyone have any more questions? Okay. Well, I guess you're free to roam the earth.
yeah, and
Otherwise,
I
they're
really
required by
appreciate
law
my
to go to
hosts.
cemetery.
Everybody has been so good to me here today. I've gotten a, you know, obviously it was a mini tour. If I stayed here for a few days, maybe I could get the maxi tour. But yeah, I really, really appreciate everything that y'all done for me here, and I'm really glad I got to come here. I wanted to come here. So I wanted to come here because of him originally. But then, you know,
There are just so many people.
there's just so many people here that are so great.
If you can't get enough Heritage Alliance, next Thursday is our history trivia at the Visitor Center, so you can find out more about that.
Oh, and I do have cards if people, I think I've got enough.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.